Welcome in to Daily Faceoff Live, your go-to source for everything hockey. Live every weekday at noon Eastern.
Welcome in to an April 13th edition of Daily Faceoff Live. Yes, you're Remchuk and McKenna with you for 25 minutes or 30 minutes of straight hockey talk. Mike, how are you doing?
Man, I'm doing good. It's nice to finally have the field set for the Stanley Cup playoffs. We'll dive into it here, but all 16 teams have now clinched, and we know at least who's going to be in the dance. Where they're going to be, that remains to be settled. Tyler, lots to watch tonight in NHL action.
Yeah, I think we can dub today moving day in the NHL. Everyone knows they have a home in the Stanley Cup playoffs. They just don't quite know where it's going to be. The 16th team to clinch their spot, the New York Islanders, who did it with a 4-2 win over the Montreal Canadiens last night. James Nichols from the fourth period is going to stop by a little bit later on in the show to really go deep on the Islanders and the Devils. But Mike, let's throw 2 minutes and 30 seconds up on the clock and talk about this Islanders team punching their ticket to the Stanley Cup playoffs. It's an interesting group. They have an elite goaltender in Ilya Sorokin. I don't hate their blue line by any means. Up front with a guy like Matt Barzal out of the lineup, I think their forward group leaves you wanting a little bit more potentially. What do you make of this Islanders team? Are they a group that, is going to get in and have this be a waste of 8 days or whatever Daryl Sutter said last year in regards to the Avalanche? Or is this a team that can maybe give a top seed like the Bruins or the Canes some fits in the first round?
Well, I mean, who knows? For a team that can defend, you always get worried playing against them in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And the Islanders have played that spoiler role previously. Now, of course, this year under Lane Lambert, it's looked a little bit different. The Islanders have struggled to score. That hasn't been any surprise. Bringing in Horvat, the team started to win more. Scoring didn't go up a whole lot. It's just basically the defense is solid, and Ilya Sorokin might be the best goaltender in the NHL right now. So I think the Islanders can absolutely be a thorn in somebody's side. Against the Bruins, man, I don't see that one being good because you look at that matchup. The Isles were 0-2-1 against the Bruins this year. They allowed almost 5 goals a game. That's very un-Sorokin-like. But here's the thing. You're looking at these matchups for tonight's games, Tyler. The Panthers are going against the Hurricanes. And Carolina is going to be rooting hard for the Hurricanes because Carolina does not, in my eyes, want to see the Panthers get a point because they don't want to play the Bruins if you can help it. I think the Islanders would love to face the Hurricanes or Devils. Okay. Now, the Hurricanes, they were 1-3-0 against them this year, the Islanders were. But you look at the scoring totals, Islanders scored 2.25, Canes only scored 3. In a close matchup like that, I think the Islanders like that. And they were pretty good. They were 2-1 against the Devils this year. So I think the Islanders are really going to be watching tonight's game, especially between the Carolina Hurricanes and Panthers, to see what happens and who they're going against because it matters for them.
Yeah, it's one of the many seeding spots up for grabs tonight. Florida taking on the Capitals. If Florida wins, they then leapfrog the Islanders, and Florida basically playing tonight to not have to roll into Boston, because I think you're right. I think that Canes matchup is just a lot easier. They have goalies who have struggled to stay healthy in the past. They're going to be without Evgeny Svechnikov as well. Man, I mean, that Canes team does seem ripe for the picking. I don't hate the Islanders in that matchup at all, so I'm going to agree with you on that. But also, it might not be the Canes, because if Carolina loses their last game and the Devils either win or just bring it to OT, they own the tiebreaker. The Devils could actually still slot into that top spot and then avoid a matchup with the New York Rangers. So much on the line still in the East. We'll touch on that a little bit later. But last night, as the Islanders clinched, that meant the 16-year playoff run for the Pittsburgh Penguins came to an end, with Crosby and Malkin both healthy for the entire season as well, which is quite the wild thing. Like at the beginning of the year, if you would have told me, hey, the Penguins are going to miss, I would have said, they probably dealt with some really bad injuries to some key guys. I know Chris Letang missed some time throughout the year, but Crosby and Malkin both played 70 plus games. This team did not get in to the playoffs. It feels like a failure of massive proportions here in Pittsburgh. And our very own Frank Saravalli wrote an article today at dailyfaceoff.com, and he had 10 big questions for the 16 teams out of the NHL playoffs. And the first one was, is Ron Hextall going to survive as the GM of the Pittsburgh Penguins, or is that an area where they could potentially make a move? Mike, your take on that, and your take on maybe what the Penguins need to look to do this summer?
Well, I don't like calling for anybody's job, and I'm not going to do that. But I think the writing on the wall is that Hextall and for that matter, also Brian Burke, who heads up the hockey operations for Pittsburgh,
Hmm.
I don't think they're going to be around next year. And a lot of that has to do with Fenway Sports Group, the ownership of that team. They purchased this club in 2021. They inherited Hextall and Burke. And really, when you look at the record, it hasn't been there. Hextall is a GM, 7 seasons in the NHL, split between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. There's only 4 years that the team's been in the playoffs that he's been in charge of, and they haven't won a round. And I think that this offseason, the trades that were made and the moves that were made just don't look very good. John Marino out the door for Ty Smith doesn't look great. Rolling the dice with Jari and DeSmith, especially after Jari had health problems last year. He had him again this year. DeSmith's game took a back seat, and he only won 50. He was 15-20 this year. When you look at win-loss, Jeff Carter's deal looks bad. Evgeny Malkin couldn't control himself and stay out of the penalty box. The depth wasn't there. And what I don't like, there's not a lot of help coming to retool this team. Wilkes-Barre's 29th in the league in the American League. They only have one forward in the top 45 in American League scoring, one D in the top 56 in D scoring in the AHL. This team needs a lot of work, and that's why I think you're looking at a new management team coming into Pittsburgh.
Yeah, it really wouldn't surprise me either. And Frank's article really lays out a couple of interesting points with that. I look at some of the moves he's made, and they don't feel like big, or they were big swings, but swinging at the wrong pitches almost. Like going out, okay, did you really have to spend that much and then re-sign Ricard Raquel? Was Michael Granlund even the right move there? The one thing I do wonder about this summer, Mike, is the JT Miller thing. I mean, Frank Saravalli reported on this show that it got so far down the line with that conversation between Miller potentially going to the Penguins that the Canucks were already starting to try figure out what they were going to do with Jason Zucker, who would have been the cap casualty going out. So, I mean, I wonder about that. Maybe Hextall, if he gets one more summer to make some swings, maybe that's a deal that comes through, and maybe a piece like Miller can spark them. But it seems gloomy in Pittsburgh right now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And realistically, they only missed the playoffs by a couple points, but you still have Crosby and Malkin and Letang, and they're going to be there for a while. So you can't go full rebuild. This needs to be fixed. I just don't know who the person's going to be to have the chance to do it.
So the Penguins miss, and it's doom and gloom. The Sabres are officially eliminated over the last 48 hours, and it's really not. It's actually almost quite the opposite. A lot of people really inspired by what this Sabres team did this year and what they could do moving forward. Mike, this team just missed. I mean, 5 points out right now. Even if things don't break their way, they could end up 6 points out, sure. But the steps forward they took this year have Sabres fans feeling good, and they should feel good, is my take here, because this is a team with a lot of young talent, a lot of guys that took steps forward this year, and Kevin Adams has a boatload of cap space. Mike, what should the Sabres and Kevin Adams be looking to do this summer to bolster this team and take another step forward next year?
I wanted to see the Sabres take a big swing at the trade deadline, kind of just for the fun of it and because they had the cap space. But I think Kevin Adams was smart to stick to his game plan here. His team still has a full complement of draft picks. They even have 2 second-rounders this year, so maybe they make a package and trade for somebody. But that $19.5 million in cap space next year it's a lot to look at, but we have to remember that a year down the road in 24-25, Rasmus Dahlin, Owen Power, they're going to need new contracts. And Jack Quinn's in that mix as well. So, you're probably going to have to pay out there. Adams has to be cognizant of that. But his playbook is to lock up players, young players, on long-term deals. Thompson, Cousins, Samuelson's, all smart deals. Tuck's on a 4.75. I think the best thing that he could do this offseason is to probably add to the middle of that team, grab some dependable forwards for middle to bottom 6, right? A Nola Chari, someone like that, that's going to be mid-priced, that can get you some scoring, some smart hockey. And even though they've got 7 or 8 defensemen under contract next year, I still think that the Sabres probably need to bulk up on the blue line. They do need more of a veteran presence back there, not just Ilya Lyubushkin. They need somebody more for me to take the next step to make the Stanley Cup playoffs. But I think they're right there. I think that Adams needs to be smart, stick to his game plan, but he can definitely spend a little bit this summer.
Yeah, you can. I think maybe the only thing that doesn't work in their favor is that this free agent class isn't really that strong. Although, I mean,
Right.
we saw Vlad Tarasenko, Patrick Kane both go to the New York Rangers. What do you think about one of them as a fit? Because I look at this team, I eye up the line chart on Daily Faceoff, and I go, all right, Thompson, if you were to run Thompson and Cousins down the middle, man, maybe you want to get like a really high-end partner for a guy like Dylan Cousins. If you like the Tuck, Thompson, Skinner trio, then, hey, what if you could convince one of Patrick Kane or Vlad Tarasenko to come ride shotgun next to the workhorse from Whitehorse, Dylan Cousins?
Yeah, the key for me, I mean, Patrick Kane is from Buffalo, man. It's just two storybook. I think the key to it would be how long would he want to go? Are you looking at a 1-year deal, a 2 or 3-year deal, and what's his price point? Like Kane's not going to come cheap. You think he's going to be minimum $8 million, something like that? You'd think 7, 8, 9, 10. Like it all depends on years. So I'd like that, but I do worry about the long term. You need to give growth to the players that are starting to eat up that top end space in Buffalo, and to stagnate them by putting someone in like a Kane, that might not be the right play for what Adams and what he wants to do with that team. That's going to be a tough decision.
It will be, but it'll be a fun summer to watch in Buffalo. That's a team that I'm excited to see what the pieces they can kind of put in place over the next couple of months. Mike, off the start of the show, we dubbed it Moving Day. So let's sink our teeth into what is on the line tonight and take a look at tonight's schedule in the NHL. The Canes in Florida. Pittsburgh taking on the Columbus Blue Jackets, the Jets playing the Avs, Blues and Stars, Oilers, Sharks, Kings, Ducks, Kraken, and the Golden Knights. Now in the East, we kind of laid it out earlier what's on the line. In the West, Dallas and Colorado are playing for that top spot in the Central. Neither of them can get that top spot in the entire conference. That will go to one of Vegas or Edmonton, and that's what I want to zero in on, Mike, because with those 4 playoff teams in the Pacific all in action tonight, there could be some serious movement. An Edmonton win and a Vegas regulation loss means the Oilers win the conference and win the division for the first time since 1987. But there's also a chance the Oilers end up playing the Kings. If the Kraken win and the Oilers lose, then we could actually end up with a Kraken Oilers. There's so many possibilities is what I'm getting at here as I marble mouth my way through all of them. But Mike, the Pacific is what we're watching tonight because there could be some big swings there.
Yeah, I agree. Especially, like the Central's still left to be won, right? Even though the Stars and Avalanche are both playing tonight, the Avalanche still have a second game on their schedule. So let's forget about that. And the Pacific, as much as we know that teams are making the playoffs, it's still kind of wide open here. And Edmonton's got a clearer path right now to taking the Pacific. If you ask me, they've won 8 straight. And look who they're playing against tonight, the Sharks. Sharks are terrible right now. And Vegas is playing against Seattle. The thing is, Vegas handled Seattle. They've handled them on Tuesday. They've handled them all season long. What really gets interesting is to look at LA, because man, can you imagine if LA drops another and Seattle manages to sneak into the 3rd place spot in the Pacific? It would really throw a monkey wrench in everything, because like, I don't think that the 1st place team in the Pacific wants to play against LA at all. If you had to choose between LA and Seattle, it's Seattle all day long. So I'm very curious to see how this plays out, because there's definitely pressure points here. Teams you wouldn't want to play. We know Winnipeg's going to be at the bottom, and if you can play them, I'd say that's probably a better play. But I don't know, Tyler, if you had to pick even between Seattle and Winnipeg, though, like which of those teams do you think would be the harder out? We talked about Winnipeg yesterday and the Hellebuck factor. I'm not sure about it there, man. Like that's a tough beat, one of those two, if you had to choose.
Yeah, like, I mean, from hosting Oilers Nation every day, I think I got a bit of a pulse on how that fan base is feeling. And I think Connor Hellebuck scares a lot of Oilers fans. I think it happened in the bubble year and in the shortened season, or in the Canadian division season, when Hellebuck just slammed the door shut for 3 games or for 4 games and they were done. Man, I mean, the Jets scare me for Hellebuck alone. The Kraken maybe don't worry me as much if I'm the Oilers, because I've matched up so well against them. But the weird thing is, the only way to end up playing the Kraken, if you're the Oilers, is if you lose tonight to San Jose, which also doesn't feel like a possibility. So I think we're getting an Edmonton-LA rematch, and wouldn't that be something, Mike? Those two teams went toe-to-toe last year, and the Kings look a lot better this year. That would be a hell of a series.
Yeah, I tell you what, though, the Kings better hope Fiala is ready to go. Like, he's the key to that team being better and ready to go. They need Mikey Anderson in the lineup. If they don't have that full complement of players, watch out. But that was a battle last year. I had a front row seat between the benches for Game 3 of that series, and I'd love to see more of it this year.
It would be something. Let's head back to the Eastern Conference now and welcome in James Nichols for a new edition of the All 32. You can find him on Twitter at James Nichols NHL. He is the Devils and Islanders correspondent for the 4th period. James, appreciate you giving us some time. I want to get your thoughts on the New York Islanders clinching a playoff spot last night, but I look at this team and I go, okay, their record, they're 18th in the league since the trade deadline. They're not exactly surging into the playoffs here as that 8th seed, but when you look at how they match up against either the Canes or the Bruins, do you think this Islanders team has upset potential?
Well, I'll tell you right now, the consensus for most, and I believe, is that the Islanders are best built for the playoffs rather than getting to the playoffs. And lucky for them, some things went right with other teams not playing as well as they could have, and maybe clinching a spot of their own, and they get to game 82 last night and have the ability to clinch themselves. So they get in by the skin of their teeth, but we've seen what the Islanders can do in seasons past. Not last year, obviously they missed the playoffs, but the season prior, and even the one even prior to that, where they went to back-to-back conference finals. So there is definite upset potential here. They've already upset the Carolina Hurricanes once. I don't want to say that they can definitely upset the Boston Bruins, because I think that's a tough matchup there for just about anybody in the NHL. But there is definite upset potential here, because many don't want to see the New York Islanders in the playoffs now that they are officially in.
And I wonder about the New Jersey Devils. I would love to see this matchup, Islanders and Devils, almost as sexy as it would be Rangers versus Devils. Haven't been part of that previously when I was playing. I know what that's like. I know what the heat is between those teams. So with the Devils, I really only have two questions about this club. They're so good offensively, the metrics, the analytics, all those things. But there's always been the question of the level of grit and nastiness that takes place in the playoffs. Do the Devils have that? Can Vitek Vanacek get it done? Because he's had moments this year where he looked really good, and he's had times where he just hasn't had to do a lot. So what are your expectations from the grit level, from the goaltending standpoint for the Devils?
Yeah, and on the goaltending, I had just asked Lindy Ruff about this the other day. I said, how important was it for him to have that really good game he had on Tuesday night when they won? I think it was 5-2 or 6-2. Very easily could have they could have given up four goals, and Lindy Ruff had said, it was extremely important for Vitek to have that night he had going into the playoffs, just for the sheer confidence that he's building for himself and for the team in front of him. So I do believe that Vitek Vanacek has really stabilized the Devils' crease. We've seen what it was like last year. The Devils, believe it or not, were not as bad as they looked last year. They just couldn't get a save. So the fact that he stabilized it himself this season, I think you can definitely depend on him going into the playoffs. As far as the grit, that's exactly what Tom Fitzgerald tried to address at the trade deadline, acquiring Timo Meier. Obviously, Timo Meier addresses other needs as well, such as goal scoring. But you're really starting to see Timo come into his own recently. He's got, I think, 5 goals in his last 6 games. He's just throwing the body out there, looking real comfortable. He admitted the other night too that he's really starting to understand Lindy Ruff's system a lot more. It was a little confusing, he said at first, but he's got it down now. And so you can see that he's growing more and more comfortable each night. And don't forget, they also acquired Curtis Lazar, who, when he was acquired by the Devils, was already the leading hits producer for the team just upon acquisition. So I do think he'll draw back into the lineup, especially for the playoffs. And I think that does take care of any grit that they might have been lacking before, because you could really only depend on Nathan Bastian and Miles Wood for that. The rest of the team is rather small, right? Even the other night, I was talking to somebody about Ryan Graves and how he hasn't been as physical as he maybe should be. He's been a little bit more mobile, which is great, but he does have that physicality that he can present to other teams and to his opponents. So if he could just up that physicality even more, that's a little bit more sugar on top for the physicality that the Devils will need going to the playoffs. This is a team that hasn't been there in 5 seasons, and a lot of that roster, outside of the acquisitions from this summer, haven't been there. So they might not really know until they get there what the physicality is going to take. And that's why, guys like Timo Meier and Curtis Lazar were crucial for them to acquire at the deadline.
If the Devils were to get the Rangers in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs, what would be kind of the biggest deciding factor, the X factor for the Devils going into that series? What's one area of your game that you're like, okay, if they're going to beat the Rangers in a best of 7, they need this going well for them?
It's going to be the goaltending. I know I just said earlier that Vitek Vanacek has stabilized it, but you look at the offenses, I think that you can consider those a wash. You look at the defenses, I think you can also consider those a wash. So for me, it's the goaltending. Obviously, we know what Igor Shesterkin has done in the past. He's the reigning Vezina trophy winner, and Vitek Vanacek, although consistent, is just not up to that level yet. So as long as the Devils get consistent goaltending and can continue to maintain that constant puck pressure that Lindy Ruff and Nico Hischier have constantly reassured or reapplied within the locker room for the team over and over again. Puck pressure in all three zones. If they can maintain that, I think that it's the best matchup for the Devils heading into the first round. So that's what I'm hoping for. At least I'd love to cover a Rangers Devils first round matchup. That's definitely exciting. But we'll see after tonight.
That would be a lot of fun. It would be a lot of fun. Actually, Kate, one more quickly because we got a couple of minutes. I'm looking at this blue line, and we all knew who Dougie Hamilton is. He's legit. He's elite. Sure. But this blue line, you said it, on par kind of with the New York Rangers. And at the beginning of the year, that would have surprised a lot of people. What's been the biggest surprise to you on this Devils blue line that's allowed them to have this kind of success?
Yeah, I think most people might say, and including myself, the evolution or the revelation of John Marino, just because the Devils kind of got him for pennies, really, when you think about it, right? They sent Ty Smith and a draft pick to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it was surprising during the time of the trade that the Penguins were giving up on a guy with some term. But I would say that John Marino has definitely helped stabilize that blue line a little bit, and he's been playing very well in tandem with Ryan Graves. As a duo, I think that they've been one of the best, if not the best, duo for the Devils this year. And then more recently, Kevin Ball has really turned it on. The evolution of Kevin Ball has been really good as well, which bodes well for that physicality aspect that we talked about a little bit earlier, because he is the largest player on the team at 6'6", 220 pounds, maybe a little bit more than that. So the evolution of Kevin Ball and the acquisition of John Marino have been really good for this team. And now that they have Luke Hughes in the mix, we'll see how much he does play moving forward. But, that's just a luxury to have, I think, for their seventh defenseman at this point right now.
James, the insight was fantastic, man. Thanks for hopping on, and we'll catch up again throughout the playoffs.
Thanks, boys. Looking forward to the next time.
Mike, we're going to pull a bit of an audible here for hashtag AskDFO and our inbox question, because we got a question from the YouTube chat. We were going to touch on this in garbage time, but we're hitting on it now. The Blackhawks making an announcement today that Jonathan Toews will not be re-signed next year. Tonight will be his final game as a Chicago Blackhawk. Derek asks, what's next for Toews since he won't be re-signing in Chicago?
My gut feeling says he's going to try to play. From all the verbiage that's come out of him, it feels like he's not done. At 34 years of age, even with the health setbacks in the last couple of years, it feels like he wants another crack at the Stanley Cup. My best guess, though, also, Tyler, I think it might take him a little bit for him to make a decision. And you can see here, this was the statement put out today that I've had a number of conversations with Jonathan throughout the season about his future with the Blackhawks. And this is coming from GM Kyle Davidson. And recently we had the difficult conversation that he won't be re-signing this offseason. Tonight will be his final game as a Blackhawk. And it was very important for us to be able to provide the proper send-off for Jonathan and our fans. He's done so much for the organization, and no matter where he plays next, we're excited to get our fans to get the chance to show Jonathan exactly how much he means to them, and vice versa here, Kyler. This is a tough day for a player when the writing's on the wall. He's been the captain of this team now since he was 20 years old, 14 years at the helm, 3 Stanley Cups, a Conn Smythe, you name it. He deserves to go out in his own way, whether it's his career or with the Blackhawks, but I think he's going to try to play it again, Tyler. I just hope that he gets a chance to make the right decision, sit back, not make that choice on July 1st.
Yeah, and actually, when you look at the way he's even handled this season, the last couple of seasons with the illnesses he's battled, he's always seemed very methodical and thought out. He doesn't seem like a guy who rushes anything. With those illnesses, that's why I sit here and go, man, you've won everything you could possibly win. You've made a ton of money. Maybe he will sit there and go, I've had a really good career and I want to be remembered as only a Chicago Blackhawk. That personally wouldn't stun me at all. If he were to look for a new spot, though, you would imagine a lot of contenders would be lining up for this guy. He's a Manitoba native. Maybe a return to one of these Canadian teams that's looking to, again, keep their Stanley Cup window open. Maybe that shouldn't be ruled out.
Maybe, if it was me, I'd probably retire. I planned my retirement about 3 years before I walked away from the game, though. That's just how I am, I think. And it's not like I had as much of a resume as Toews and a chance to go win a Stanley Cup. So apples to oranges, but no matter what, Jonathan Toews, a fixture in Chicago. He'll have statues built to him there. And an absolute legend in that city that growing up in St. Louis, I can't stand so much.
An absolute first ballot Hall of Fame lock when you consider
Yeah.
both the NHL and international resume of Jonathan Toews. Let's move along to our daily bets brought to you by our friends at Betano, betano.ca. The game starts now with Betano, the regular season coming to an end with Betano, and I got a couple of plays for this evening, including a money line underdog, Mike, and I'm taking the Columbus Blue Jackets at plus 180. The Penguins are eliminated. I think morale will be down. They are in Columbus on the road, and I think they're just going to be looking forward to getting on the plane and getting back home. Columbus, young team. I don't think their management wants to see them win, but I certainly do. Plus 180, I think, is a nice spot for a, team. Neither of them have anything to play for, so I'll take the home dog is basically what I'm trying to say here. I do have a couple of parlays for tonight as well. In the West, I'm calling this the they have something on the line parlay. The Dallas Stars minus 238 on the money line. The Edmonton Oilers minus 182 on the puck line. I think both these sides will take care of business as they try to move into the top spot in their respective divisions. You play these two together, it's plus 120. I like that value. And my second one is a shot prop parlay that involves Pavel Buchnevich. He's hit this mark in 4 of his last 5 with the line only set at 1.5. And Joel Farabee, this line is set at 1.5. He has 11 shots in his last 2 games. That's a lot. That's averaging 5.5. I can do that math quick. I like taking Farabee over 1.5 shots on goal. You play these two together, plus 159 on Betano. That is a tremendous spot as well. So a couple of parlays and the Blue Jackets on the money line, brought to you by our friends at Betano. And Mike, will move into garbage time, where Craig Anderson, he was in the starter's crease at Sabres skate. Sounds like they could give him game 82 if it's his final one, Mike. I mean, what a perfect moment and what a send-off it'd be. Oh, you're muted, Mike.
It would be for the all-time winningest goaltender of the Ottawa Senators. Sometimes you got to check facts and you don't want to hear the typing out here. I tell you what, I think the world of Craig Anderson. For somebody who's been in the NHL for 20 years now, off and on early in his career, but 20 total seasons. He's 41 years old. He's the oldest player in the NHL. He still managed to put up a .912 save percentage this year. And he's got well over 300 wins in the league, 318 total. I think he'll probably, if this is it, he'd probably best be remembered for that magical 2017 playoff run with the Ottawa Senators to the Eastern Conference Final. He had a .929 save percentage career in playoffs, like big time performer. For me, Craig said that he can go either way. He could come back, he could go to Florida, coach his kids in baseball, whatever the best choice is for him. We'll say this though. Buffalo Sabres have Devin Levi coming in, and he's going to need a mentor. And I'm not sure if Eric Comrie or Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to be that guy. Straight up. You also have to think, though, can Craig play 30 games or more if needed? So I don't know how this is going to go, but if this is the end of the road for Craig Anderson, what a career, what a friend, what a teammate. I'm happy that I still get to catch up to him when he swings through St. Louis because, like I say, this is a guy he's really turned into one of the best locker room guys you can imagine. When early in his career, and he'll admit this, he was not. And it's been a big growth, and what he can do for Levi, what he's done for Buffalo this year, man, it's been huge. So congrats to Craig Anderson. Whatever you choose to do, I'll support you, buddy.
Just quickly, because we have less than a minute left, you know him personally. Is that a guy who maybe has coaching in his blood?
Coaching baseball for his kids, I think, sounds about right. Yeah. We'll see.
There you go. Great insight today from you, Mr. McKenna. It is going to be a fun night around the NHL, and this show will be back tomorrow at noon Eastern to break it all down. Enjoy moving day, hockey fans, and keep it locked on Daily Faceoff. We'll talk again tomorrow.
Thanks for tuning in to Daily Faceoff Live. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to never miss an episode.